The storm at Forrester Creations was no longer brewing, it had arrived. Whispers in the hallways turned into confrontations in the boardroom, and one name kept coming up in every tense conversation: Brooke Logan. Her reunion with Ridge, sudden and sweeping, had been painted as a fairy tale comeback, a return to the iconic pairing that once defined the Forrester dynasty. But beneath the sparkle of rekindled love was a new fracture forming, a dangerous split that could destroy the family from the inside. Taylor Hayes had been quiet. Too quiet. Her graceful acceptance of Ridge's decision to go back to Brooke seemed too polished, too rehearsed. Friends believed she had moved on, that she had found her peace. But Taylor's silence was not healing, it was hiding. Because Brooke, never one to walk away quietly, had made sure her victory was visible. Passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. Thinly veiled jabs at Taylor's past mistakes. And one particularly cruel moment, when Brooke confronted Taylor in front of their grandchildren, undermining her role not just as a co-parent, but as a mother. That moment broke something. Taylor left the house without a word, her eyes cold, her hands shaking. She didn't tell anyone what Brooke had said. But someone else had witnessed it. Someone who wasn't going to let it go. Thomas. For years, he had struggled to be seen as more than the damaged son of Ridge and Taylor. He had battled obsession, manipulation, and the scars of a childhood shaped by chaos. But through it all, there was one constant: his loyalty to his mother. And now, with Taylor humiliated and pushed aside again by Brooke, that loyalty hardened into resolve. Thomas wasn't going to let Brooke get away with it. Not this time. Behind closed doors, he started planning. At first, it was just anger. Then intention. He knew Brooke's weaknesses. He had studied her patterns. He knew where she was vulnerable. Not just in her relationship with Ridge, but in her standing at Forrester. Her position was built on image, on influence, on the long and tangled history she shared with Ridge and Eric. But it was also built on the perception that she had changed. That she was no longer the scheming woman who once stole husbands, manipulated contracts, and burned bridges with a smile. Thomas knew better. He didn't need to expose something new. He just needed to remind people of who she really was. He started with the archive. Late nights in the Forrester server room. Old emails. Board meeting transcripts. Audio files. He collected everything, every questionable decision, every veiled threat, every moment when Brooke pushed someone out to pull herself forward. He compiled it into a file he called simply Logan. And then he waited. Ridge began to notice. Thomas was colder, distant. At meetings, he no longer deferred to Brooke. He challenged her designs, questioned her choices. He was bold, confrontational, and unapologetic. Brooke, at first, laughed it off. Thomas is being Thomas, she said. But it escalated. When she unveiled a new lingerie line meant to revive her Brooke's bedroom legacy, Thomas torpedoed it in front of the entire team, calling it dated, tone-deaf, and dangerously out of sync with the brand. Ridge defended her. Thomas didn't back down. Steffi tried to play mediator. "Don't do this," she warned him. "You'll split the family again." But Thomas was unmoved. He told her everything. What Brooke had said to their mother. The way Taylor had cried in private, ashamed and broken. Steffi was horrified, but not surprised. She remembered too well the decades of tension between Taylor and Brooke, the endless battles, the power plays, the emotional warfare masked as civil co-parenting. Now it was happening again, and Thomas was done being quiet. Then came the leak. A Forrester investor received an anonymous packet. Brooke's past financial records, including the hush money she paid during the Belief patent scandal and documentation of her interference in the Ridge, Taylor divorce proceedings years ago. Within hours, it was on the desk of Eric Forrester, who was blindsided. He confronted Brooke in private. She denied leaking anything, but the damage was done. The board began to question her judgment. Ridge defended her again. But this time, His voice wavered. Thomas didn't claim responsibility. He didn't need to. Brooke knew it was him. And in private, she confronted him, no cameras, no audience, just mother-in-law and son locked in verbal war. "You're trying to destroy me," she said. "You already did that," he replied. "When you humiliated my mother. When you made her feel like she didn't matter. You've been doing it for decades, Brooke. You think we forget. But we don't." Ridge was pulled in both directions. His son on one side, his soulmate on the other. He tried to mediate, to find neutral ground. But there was no peace to broker. Not this time. Brooke gave him an ultimatum. "You either put your son in his place or I walk." Thomas didn't give him a choice. "If you back her, I'm gone from the company. From your life. Choose." Ridge was paralyzed. And that's when Taylor finally spoke. At a press event for Forrester's new fall line, Taylor made a surprise appearance. Public, poised, and deliberate. She praised the new designs, credited her children's creative leadership, and then calmly, coldly exposed what had been done to her. She didn't name names. But she told the truth, that she had been mistreated, disrespected, and pushed aside by someone who had promised peace. Her speech went viral within hours. Hashtag Team Taylor began trending. Public sympathy shifted. And Brooke, once the face of resilience, was now being re-examined through the lens of her own past. Steffi stepped in with a proposal: restructure the executive board, reduce Brooke's influence, reinstate Taylor as a consultant for wellness and brand direction. Brooke refused. "This is my legacy," she screamed. "You can't erase me." But the votes were being counted. Carter, hesitant but fair, leaned toward Steffi. Zend and RJ abstained. Eric abstained too, out of respect. But Donna voted with Brooke. It was a tie. Ridge held the deciding vote. He looked at Thomas, then at Brooke, then at Taylor. And the silence was thick. He voted yes. Brooke lost her board seat. She walked out of the building that day without saying a word. But everyone knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Back home, Ridge tried to explain that it wasn't personal, that it was about balance. Brooke didn't respond. She just stared at the wall, her hands clenched. Because deep down, she knew what Thomas was capable of. And now, with power, momentum, and righteous fury behind him, she wasn't just facing a bitter son. She was facing a man who had waited his entire life for revenge. And who had learned to wield it with precision. At Forrester, the fallout continued. Media speculated on the family rift. Rumors spread about Brooke's next move. Some said she would partner with Spencer to launch a rival line. Others claimed she was going to sue. Taylor, meanwhile, returned to her clinic, insisting she didn't want power, only peace. But no one believed that either. Because peace was no longer an option. The Forresters were at war. And Ridge, for the first time in his life, had no idea whose side he was really on. At Il Giardino, the celebration for Will's return from boarding school was anything but ordinary. Katie, ever the doting mother, had planned a lavish masked party for her son, a symbolic coming-of-age celebration that also doubled as a gathering of LA's glittering elite. The theme was indulgent and reckless. Asterisk, what happens at Il Giardino stays at Il Giardino. Asterisk, with champagne flowing and masks concealing faces, the air was thick with secrets and the scent of drama waiting to ignite. Guests arrived in designer suits, feathered disguises, and mischief on their minds. But amid the revelers was one uninvited figure, Luna. Masked, cloaked, and silent, her presence was a ticking time bomb. Months earlier, Luna had vanished under suspicious circumstances after a very public breakdown, a spiral triggered by betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation, with Steffi at the center of it all. Rumors had swirled that she had fled the country or worse, but no one truly believed she was gone for good. Now, hidden among the masked guests, she watched, plotted, and waited. Meanwhile, Will, or Will Electra, as his boarding school friends now called him, was eager to prove he was no longer the boy who left LA, but a man with ambition, appetite, and an eye for danger. Emboldened by the party's no-rules atmosphere, he zeroed in on one particularly enigmatic guest, Luna, though he had no idea who she truly was. Drawn in by her silence and allure, Will pursued her with a mix of adolescent arrogance and adult desire, believing he was about to seal his rite of passage into manhood. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't seducing a stranger, he was walking into a trap. Deacon Sharp, ever the opportunist and now the polished owner of Il Giardino, kept a careful watch over the proceedings. He had sanctioned the party for Katie with a smirk and a wink, knowing full well that anything could and would happen. But he didn't anticipate the legal firestorm that was about to detonate under his roof. The moment Will and Luna disappeared into the shadows together, masks still on, Deacon's fate was sealed. Cameras installed for security would later serve as the catalyst for scandal. One misidentification, one touch in the dark under mistaken identity, and the story shifted from teenage curiosity to criminal ambiguity. Consent blurred. Intentions were questioned. And the fallout promised to be nothing short of catastrophic. Back at the Forrester estate, Steffi felt the tremors before the quake. A call tipped her off, a sighting of Luna, or someone who looked like her, entering Il Giardino during the masked chaos. Panic flared. If Luna was back and seeking revenge, Steffi knew she wouldn't strike loud, she'd do it quietly, surgically, with precision. The kind of revenge that destroys reputations, families, and legacies. She tried to reach Ridge. She tried to warn Thomas. But it was too late. Luna had already infiltrated the party, and she had already chosen her moment. The investigation began the next morning when Katie discovered Will hadn't returned home. At first, she thought he was simply hungover or sleeping it off with friends. But by noon, the whispers started. A guest had gone missing. Another was found half-dressed in the wine cellar. Someone had video of a heated argument behind the kitchen. Then came the damning detail. Security footage showed a guest in Luna's exact outfit entering a private dining room with Will, but the guest was masked and unidentifiable. Legal authorities stepped in. Deacon, sweating under pressure, was warned he could face liability. And then another bomb dropped. Luna's image, full face, unmasked, was caught leaving through the alley, walking away from Il Giardino like a ghost stepping out of the fire. Now the question wasn't just where Luna had been, but what she wanted. And if Will had been targeted, used, or manipulated in a deeper revenge plot. Steffi knew Luna hadn't returned just to haunt. She had returned to ruin. Luna had lost everything, her love, her dignity, her place in the Forresters' inner circle, and she blamed one person for it, Steffi. The masked party had only been the beginning. What came next would be cold, calculated, and devastating. As Forrester Creations scrambled to respond to the headlines, Steffi began pulling files. She remembered Luna's tech background, her obsession with digital surveillance, pattern recognition, voice mimicry. Could Luna have faked identities? Slipped in under someone else's name? Used tech to manipulate the footage? Steffi was sure of it. But proving it was another story. Ridge urged her to stay out of it. Let the lawyers handle it, he said. But Steffi couldn't sit still. Not when her daughter's safety, her husband's trust, and the family's name were on the line. Elsewhere, Luna watched from a motel room with bare walls and a cracked mirror. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just studied the fallout. Her plan was unfolding perfectly. She had inserted herself into the party without detection, planted the seed of scandal, and ensured Steffi would spend every waking minute looking over her shoulder. But the real move was yet to come. Because Luna hadn't just returned to clear her name, she came to dismantle Steffi's world piece by piece. The investigation continued, dragging in more players. Carter was brought in to assess the legal exposure. Brooke demanded answers when her name was mentioned in a guest list error, a potential alibi for Luna if someone had used her identity. Eric tried to calm the family, but even he could see the fractures forming. Finn, Steffi's husband, remained neutral at first, but once it became clear that Luna's appearance could implicate Will in a scandal, and that Deacon's business was in jeopardy, he took a firmer stance. He wanted truth, not protection. Steffi called it betrayal. Finn called it justice. The tension boiled. The press picked up on it. Il Giardino scandal. Forrester air an underage sex probe, screamed one headline. Another asked, is Luna alive? And is she coming for Steffi? Every answer only raised more questions. No one could locate Luna. No one could prove what happened behind that closed door. And Will? He remembered nothing. Just flashes. A scent. A whisper. A promise. Behind the scenes, Deacon tried to bury the footage. He knew what it showed, or rather, what it could be made to show. Katie threatened lawsuits. Bill threatened more. But the real threat was Luna herself, who had now gone completely silent. No social media. No phone calls. No demands. Just silence, the kind that grows louder with each passing day. Then a clue. Steffi's assistant discovered a receipt for a voice-altering app purchased on a burner phone weeks before the party, linked to a user who had recently accessed a Forrester employee portal using stolen credentials. Luna again. It was a digital trail, but it was messy. Steffi followed it anyway, desperate for a lead. She had one shot to expose Luna before Luna exposed them all. But Luna had already planned her next appearance. Not at a party. Not in disguise. But in court. A subpoena arrived at Forrester Creations. Luna, through her lawyer, had filed suit against the Forresters for emotional abuse, wrongful defamation, and endangerment. She claimed Steffi had conspired to erase her reputation, forcing her into exile, and that the Il Giardino scandal only proved how toxic the Forrester circle had become. The lawsuit would force Steffi to testify. So would Will. And so would Deacon, who now faced criminal exposure if it turned out he had allowed a minor to be endangered on his property. The clock was ticking. Steffi had to find hard proof that Luna had orchestrated the scandal herself, that she was not the victim, but the architect of a revenge so meticulous it blurred the lines between truth and manipulation. If she failed, it wouldn't just be her reputation on the line. It would be her family's legacy, her father's empire, her marriage. And Luna was still out there, watching, waiting, planning her final move.